Welcome to Indications and Warnings, everyone, with Chuck Pfarrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are reporting this show on June 9, 2025. It is day 1202 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Chuck, I don't know about you, but over the past few days, looking at the news, especially at the increased Russian terror attacks on Ukrainian civilians, but also at some pretty significant successes of Ukraine in the field, I'm beginning to feel that we are on the verge of a significant change in this war, Chuck.
I agree with you. We are in the summer campaign season. I think Russia understands, at least some of them do, that they cannot keep fighting this war at the rate that they are losing it. And I say that even in the face of their incremental advances. They lose on a daily basis one battalion, about 1,000 people a day. They've hit 2,000 people a day, and it was just slightly under today, as we were discussing before we went on. Their losses to date in this 72-hour military operation, there are 11 divisions in the United States Army, combat arms divisions, and a division is about 30,000 people. Okay, well, the Russians so far have lost 6 times the number of combat arms divisions that the United States Army has in total. And I mean everybody, clerk, typists, machinists, doctors, nurses, cooks, bottle washers, everybody, all dead. You can't win a war that way. Even though you keep fighting it, and you brought up some very interesting points when we were in the pre-show meeting here, and we'll get to those as well. But all of that being said, Russian casualties are going to spike this summer, and they are going to be pushing hard.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Ukraine is succeeding in changing some of the conditions in its favor on the ground and significantly in the air. And I think that's where we should begin, Chuck, with the F-16 shoot down of the Su-35 in Russian airspace. That Su-35 was over Kursk.
It was, and now this has gone a little bit back and forward in terms of let's call it what it is, folks. It literally is an information war. Ukraine was not exactly forthcoming with details immediately after the flight, the crash of the Sukhoi, for a lot of reasons, and these reasons are all coalescing now. This has been denied, it's been said, and we're not getting into the internet information fight, but we will say this. It appears with pretty good certainty that a Ukrainian F-16 shot down a Sukhoi over Russia. Why did that happen? Well, we have provided AMRAAM missiles to the Ukrainian Air Force, and Sweden has provided SAB 340 airborne command and control and advanced early warning aircraft. It's a twin engine turboprop. You can call it AWACS Junior if you want. It's got a very good phased array radar. And what possibly evolved was Ukraine watches very carefully. They watch what the Russians do. And like any badly trained enemy, they will fall into very predictable patterns. So what likely happened here, Alan, I think the Saab 340 was infiltrated into this battle engagement envelope. It could pick up this Russian fighter at a range of about 300 miles, and we'll get cut right to the chase. This Russian pilot had no idea there was an F-16 around. His missile warning radar went off, and he knew a missile was coming, but he had no idea where it came from. And he wound up walking home, as we say.
And there was nothing he could do to evade that missile. You know, Chuck, I was talking to our good friend Hop C just the other night about this very shoot down by the Ukrainian F-16. And just like you, he said a couple of things. First, it's not just the presence of the Saab 340, but it's likely the very studied tracking of Russian operations from airfields. When do they launch? What missions do they fly out on? When do they return? And all this information is kept in a book informing Ukrainians of activity from airfields. The other thing he said was quite likely the Ukrainian pilot was in dark mode. All he was doing was receiving information from the Saab AWACS plane. And he also pointed out that Ukraine pilots are now plugged in to the Link 16 system. That is what allows the Ukrainian pilot just to listen, not to emit any signals that he's about to engage a Russian fighter jet.
Right. So this is it is an AEWNC, Airborne Early Warning and Control Aircraft. So the data is transmitted, even firing solutions can be transmitted to the fighters that the Saab is going to control. I mean, Hop absolutely knows what he's talking about. He's a naval aviator with, quite a lot of experience. Interesting thing here, two things I want to say. Russia doesn't have a lot of its own airborne early warning and control aircraft. They have likely less than 10 A-50 of their airborne control aircraft, of which maybe 5 are flight worthy. If you're up there as a fighter pilot now in these Top Gun 2 era, you need airborne early warning and control. That is that sets the parameters of the air battle space, and information quite literally is power. And in this case, the information is you have a bogey at 350 miles and he doesn't know where you are.
Yeah.
And again, using what my fighter pilot friends all used to tell me when we were all young studly officers, it is a gunfight in a dark gymnasium. Everyone has a pistol and a flashlight. You turn your flashlight on first and you're dead.
Yeah.
So here we have, and there's one thing I wanted to get into too. So during the Vietnam War, the North Vietnamese Air Force and some of its Russian pilots, they were at a disadvantage equipment-wise vis-a-vis the United States, who had Air Force assets and, of course, American naval aviators flying over North Vietnam. So they were in an asymmetrical fight, and they very cleverly maneuvered their SAM systems around. They staged ambushes with their aircraft in the manner they were deployed and flew. Even though it was the most heavily defended airspace in the world, they still had to fight smart. And Ukraine now, 50 years later, is doing the same thing, asymmetrical air battles. And we've seen 3 or 4 of these occasions where Ukraine has hit really hard targets and done it because it had to maneuver this equipment around. Yeah. So the last thing I'll say about that is one of the reasons this information didn't come out right away is, look, the Saab 350 is based on a regional airliner. It had to get into the area and then it had to get out safely. And that took 24 or 36 hours, right? Because after you shoot down one of their aircraft, they are going to come buzzing out. Yeah. So all of that suggests to me, and Hop as well, that this is probably the way it went down.
Yeah. The other thing that Hop mentioned was the success of this shoot down by the Ukrainian F-16 is going to force the Russian Air Force to reevaluate its threat envelope because that Russian pilot felt completely safe 20 miles inside Russian airspace over Kursk Oblast. Obviously, he wasn't safe. So now you have Russian pilots themselves saying, wait a minute, uh, what is the threat envelope? Because it matters to all of us that we can be detected and shot down, and we won't know where that missile is coming from.
Yeah, this guy was considered himself fat, dumb, and happy. He was feet dry, as we used to say. So he thought, look, I'm over the blue part of the map. I'm good. And you and I talk about it. We don't get a lot of other people commenting on this, but when you get something like this, it does change the calculus on the other side. This was supposed to be a milk run for this guy.
Yeah,
He was in one of the better aircraft in the fleet and he got greased.
yeah,
So this could happen again, and it will happen again.
it sure will. Aside from the fact that Ukraine could use another 200 F-16s, all of which, by the way, are available. They could be delivered to Ukraine. And I guarantee you, Ukraine would train all the needed pilots for 200 F-16s. Ukraine's not getting 200 more F-16s for its Air Force. But as usual, Ukraine is proving with brain power and willpower, they can overcome Russia's superior firepower and manpower. That really is going to be the shape of this war, wherever you look at it, on the ground, in the air, or on the sea. I'm going to say for the next 90 to 120 days, Chuck.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to be seeing, uh, you know, I, everyone keeps saying, everyone, non-military information specialist, there's going to be a big Russian offensive this summer. Offensive to me means General Patton and General Omar Bradley maneuvering their armies that they commanded, multiple division formations, in a coherent, mutually supportive advance of combined arms. We're not going to see that from Russia. And I know I'm going out on a limb, but it's been 3 years. They haven't shown it to me once.
Yeah, well,
They,
we're going to get to one of the reasons why Russia isn't capable of combined arms maneuver warfare has to do with the military train. But before we get to that train, we want to stop at another airfield inside Russia. Ukraine has not stopped hitting Russian jets on the ground, and drones, Ukrainian drones, struck at Savaslika airfield outside Moscow, to the east of Moscow by quite a distance.
yep. And interestingly, you look at the press releases, and there are a couple little things that our viewers can watch for. This was a drone attack on this airfield. That's okay. You think, all right, it could be a long range Lauti drone. It could be this. All of those things are possible. Ukraine has precision strike weapons that can hit targets at 1,000 kilometers away. However, this credited the operation to Ukrainian special forces. So I am inferring, based on the phraseology, this was an attack using first-person drones, short-range drones under control of local operators lurking outside the fence. Wow, you're risking a lot. You're risking assets, their support networks, everything else. Was it worth it? Yeah. They destroyed a MiG-31K Fox, updated Foxbat of Cold War fame, and she was packing a Kinzhal missile on her center weapons pylon, and they got both of them. This bird was fueled up, armed up, ready to go, parked in her revetment. Nobody thought they were safer than that pilot when he was walking out to his bird. And they also got a Sukhoi of some variety during the same strike. Splendid, and another Russian airbase thrown into convulsions of what do we do now?
Yeah. Well, it's those Kinzhal missiles that Russia is using in its terror attacks on civilians. And uh, remember back a year ago now, the Russians hit and destroyed Ukraine's largest children's cancer hospital right in the center of Kiev. They did it with a Kinzhal missile.
Well, they know what they're aiming at, don't they? The Kinzhal was what Putin used to beat his chest and say was his world's first functional hypersonic missile. It is actually an Iskander missile painted brown and reconfigured, and I'll give them that. They had to do some tinkering. Hypersonic weapon, I prefer to call it what it is, an aeroballistic missile, meaning it's a ballistic missile dropped from an airplane. Is that new? Well, in the 60s, the U.S. Air Force used to drop Minutemen missiles out of the back of C-141 cargo planes, and they worked just as good. The good thing was there's only one aircraft that the Russians have that can carry the Kinzhals, and that is the MiG-31K. And losing one of those, that hurt.
Well, we should move from airfields and frankly, uh, a little bit from where are the drones that Ukraine has deployed inside Russia. Uh, they are seemingly uh, everywhere and nowhere. Now, the explanation to anything that happens inside Russia is it must have been a Ukrainian drone. That's not always the case. But on the ground in occupied Ukraine, Russia has now finished a rail line to deliver supplies to the front line and also into Crimea itself. It's not going so well for the Russian rail logistics system, is it, Chuck?
No, it is not. And rail lines are the best way to move troops in the field. There's no other way that you can move an entire military unit, the whole shooting match, every man, woman, camp follower, vehicle, cooking pot, microwave, everything can be put on a train and you can get it to where it wants to go. That's the good part. The bad part is the trains may move, but the tracks and bridges never move, and they are highly vulnerable. And the Russians appear to have gotten the lesson in this case that if you take out the locomotive, what you have now done is presented your entire unit in a linear column where it is virtually defenseless.
Yeah.
And this train was stopped, courtesy of drones attacking the sympathetic target of the locomotive, which burns pretty good, diesel electric. And then they picked off at least 15 main battle tanks that were on the flat cars. And I promise you, they weren't picking off the T-52s. They were picking off the new stuff.
And also picked off armored personnel carriers, a whole lot of other stuff. Maybe there were grain cars attached to this train. Maybe there weren't. There didn't have to be grain cars with hidden Ukrainian drones in them. Ukrainian drones like Spiderweb, they are not the explanation to every success that Ukraine has.
Yeah, so let's just use the operational Occam's razor here. If I've got the greatest party trick in the whole world, I want to save it for deep targets that are inaccessible any other way. Let's all think about it this way in terms of operational probability. I've got this railroad track that goes through, the principal words here, folks, are occupied Ukraine, where I have an abundance of Ukrainian patriots, and let's just say some of them know how to fly drones. Once you stopped that train, it was party time. And to me, this is much more likely. This is a partisan slash deeply inserted special operations forces op, in my opinion. And I will just also say anywhere around Melitopol is bad guy country for the Russians. This is like Armagh in Northern Ireland. This is this is tough country.
I think that's true around Melitopol, true around Tokmak. It's true along hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of this rail line that the Russians have now finished, all in order to get military supply to the front lines and into Crimea, as a matter of fact. So here's another event that is important. The Russians moved two Iskander launch systems in close to the Ukrainian border. Ukraine spotted them and took them both out. Pretty important for two reasons, to my way of thinking. First of all, it shows once again Russia can't do anything and have it remain unknown to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians really see everything the Russians are doing. And secondly, it took out two Iskander launchers. So those are two launches that aren't going to be delivering terror to Ukrainian citizens.
Yeah, this came in an important time for a couple of reasons. So how does a target like this present itself? Well, if you penetrate the communications, that there were the message, the notification for this battery commander to forward deploy his transport erection and launch vehicles. Lieutenant Colonel commanding this unit was also killed in the attack. And let's say you didn't even intercept the movement notice. There's electronics intelligence. They have certain sorts of radio frequencies that they transmit. There's all these other things. They could have intercepted targeting data, which might have included the location of the launchers and their targets. But this happened at an interesting time because the Iskander missile, which Thomas will put up an infograph, I still call it the hospital killer,
Yeah.
For good reason. But Russia has actually managed to get its production facilities up to produce these weapons at about 60 per month. That's not an inconsiderable amount of these short-range ballistic missiles. Russia doesn't always have the facilities to make its most modern weapons, but I'm glad to see that Iskander hunting is developing because Ukraine's going to need a lot more of it.
Ukraine will need a lot more of it. It also focuses attention on Ukraine's deep strikes against Russia's industrial capacity, against the defense factories. Sometimes Ukraine targets a factory that is making a vital subcomponent. That's all it makes. It's not necessarily assembling a Kinzhal missile. It's not necessarily assembling glide bombs and cruise missiles. It's just making a vital component, without which the Russians don't have a weapon.
Right. The recent Layuti strikes, and Thomas will have a Layuti infograph up for us, which I'm a bit chagrined to say that I actually didn't have one of those. I had to get busy last night before the show. But one of the recent targets in this exchange of fire, Russia sends 400 precision strike munitions to attack Ukrainian cities, hospitals, apartment buildings included. Ukraine cannot match that volume of fire, but what they can do, as Alan just said, is hit at the sinews and joints of the Russian military industrial complex. So in Kazan, at the explosive factory, they hit a production facility that makes the warheads for ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and artillery shells. Perfect. I just want to also throw in a little crack here. It's a Swiss company that was providing nitric acid for Russian explosive production. I say this because I am a proud Swiss American, and it is really pretty disappointing that Switzerland will allow this company to operate to help facilitate the making of 6,000 Russian artillery shells a day,
Yeah.
but wouldn't allow Ukraine to use the shells for its Skynex systems because they were manufactured in Switzerland. Come on, Swiss, get with it.
And that Swiss factory operating in Russia actually was highlighted as one of the top producing factories of this Swiss company. So it's shocking, basically, Chuck.
It's the name of Eurochem, folks. So if you look at something and you've got a lipstick or you've got some face cream or whatever, you might want to just throw it out. And this is from a Swiss American, so don't say I'm slamming the Swiss, but let's slam them.
No more Swiss chocolates for you, Chuck.
No more. No more.
But let's just talk for a moment more about the Liuti drone that Ukraine has developed. Has very long range and it has low observable surfaces. So this is just one aspect of the innovation that Ukraine is bringing to drone warfare. It has a unique appearance in the sky. It can't be mistaken for anything else.
Absolutely. It bears more than a passing resemblance to the Bayraktar, which the Turkish drone that was front and center uh, 3 years ago, and how far we've come. That was drone warfare back then. The the Bayraktar was an entry level predator type drone that fired guided air to ground guided missiles. You know, the Bayraktar has sort of retreated into the distant past in this war and been superseded by faster, longer range, more capable platforms. However, the aerodynamics that went into the Bayraktar, and the Layuti bears a strong resemblance to it. But again, you have aircraft that look the same. They're often different. You know, even the screws don't match. But this is a drone with that can deliver about a 75-pound warhead, 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers. It has a modular warhead and payload system. It can be used for electronic warfare, decoy, etc. But you can hit something at 600 miles, which is about the distance from LA to San Francisco, a little farther than that. That's, if you've ever done that drive, Alan, it's a pretty long drive. I think you did do it, actually.
I did do it.
Yeah.
It is a long drive. Scenic, but
Beautiful.
a lot
Yeah.
of traffic too.
A lot of traffic. Yeah.
Uh,
But
just on the drone war itself, I mean, it now there are so many aspects to the drone war. There is one kind of drone war that's taking place on the zero line. There is another kind of drone war that Ukraine is executing on targets inside Russia. On the zero line, there are increasing incidents of drone on drone dogfights. I mean, these are drone fights uh, in midair. Ukrainian intercept drones taking out Russian reconnaissance drones, Ukrainian intercept drones taking out the very feared Lancet drone that the Russians use so effectively. It has become a completely different kind of drone war. And we're about to see it play out all the way through the summer and fall, Chuck.
we really will. And we spoke of this earlier, but in 3 years, all of warfare has been turned on its head. And it has been in this last 3 years. you have the sort of democratization of air power, right? In my day, you had to pick up the PRC 101 satellite phone and call somebody so they could drop a bomb on people who were annoying me. Now you need to turn to somebody in your rifle squad and say, let the drone go. Before, if you wanted to engage strategic targets, you needed a strategic air force. Now Ukraine has a pickup truck pulls up 10 kilometers from the zero line, guys set up the catapult or the wheels or whatever, and off she goes. Uh, it's completely amazing. And it isn't just strike. The same thing for aerial reconnaissance, electronic warfare. All of these systems have devolved all the way down to the tactical level. And I mean the two-man, three-man fire team. It has absolutely changed warfare. And that is going to continue to be the reason why Russia can't win. Besides having bad generals and everything we always talk about, they need an entirely new solution to beat Ukraine. Even the United States Army would need a new solution to beat this 21st century enemy who produces 1 million drones a month. There we go. And what did you say earlier, Alan? How many minutes on the battlefield?
Well, this is one of the fascinating pieces of information that came out during my interview with David Kiroshenko, who's a Ukrainian-American reporter who's been reporting from Ukraine since 2022. So a few months ago, Ukraine drone pilots struck a Russian target every 8.5 minutes. Lately, they have reduced that kill chain down to 6.5 minutes. So every 6.5 minutes, a Ukrainian drone pilot is striking a Russian target. Could be a Russian trench, could be Russian soldiers in a tree line, could be a Russian tank, an artillery system, a radar system, you name it. But it's every 6.5 minutes. Drone pilots are working 24 hours a day. So you add up the number of targets Ukraine can hit.
Right. And there are targets that a drone can discover. I send an FPV drone up to go, within its battery life, I want it to find a target.
Yeah.
And it finds something that is so lucrative or so hardened that it would kind of be wasting its RPG style warhead on it. Well, the ability to process information too. So that FPV picks out a Russian drone operations center. It can communicate that information back to its operator who gets on the phone, just like I used to have to do, and he calls up a MiG-29 that drops a hammer guided bomb, as we saw in Kherson 3 days ago. And there's a target that you really want to approach with a certain amount of majestic firepower, and that's what happens. But even that, in my day, look, I was Batman and I had the satellite radio and I got whatever I wanted. The average grunt, it took a lot longer. Look how and we're talking about something that evolved in minutes. So the Russians had no chance to move that target. They had no chance to pack up. They didn't even have a chance to run away.
Yeah.
So this is what the Soviet/Russian military is trying to come to grips with. And I don't think they ever will come to grips with it.
I don't think they will either. We are going to see the Russians test Ukraine's drone wall of defense this summer. There's no question about that. The variety of drones being used by both Ukrainians and Russians on the zero line is something that we will get into, I think, in future shows. But it's not just about Mavic drones. It's not just about FPV drones anymore. It's about heavy lift drones like the Vampire and Baba Yaga drones that Ukraine operates. And as much as Ukrainians fear the Lancet, from Russia. Russians are terrified of the Baba Yaga drone, Chuck.
Yeah. And there's another one of those expanding sort of things. If you wanted the sky cleared above you, well, you needed to call the Air Force and the air superiority fighters to do it. Now, uh, Russian drone comes overhead. It can be literally reported by a guy with a pair of binoculars. He says it's flying 270. It's right overhead right now. And Ukrainian FPV drones are set up to besiege it. And I hate to say this, but it's just like the earliest days of military aviation in World War I. If you wanted to bring the guy down, you had to crash into him.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. But we're already beginning to see shotgun armed drones. Uh, you know, they're not to the point right now that they can carry a machine gun up. Perhaps a Baba Yaga might be able to do that, but its power is much better served by dropping 100 millimeter mortar rounds on Russian positions. And folks, so 100 millimeters is the width of a long cigarette. And I've had these things shot at me. They're pretty impressive pieces of ordnance.
Yeah. Um, we can look at in just a few minutes just about every aspect of warfare that drones have changed. And let's just begin with logistics. There have been a lot of questions about whether or not putting ground lines of communication, logistical roads under nets is really an effective defense from drones. And so it is, but it's not. This is the problem that soldiers in the front line are facing. They are looking for the slimmest of slim advantages for the just a short window of time. So if those nets work for a while and you are able to deliver at very high speed some vehicles along this logistics route, then you've got a very small advantage. So drones have changed the logistic picture on the zero line.
They really have. And that, those nets are a slender hope, but they are much better than nothing. And especially if you create an opportunity for yourself to get a go fast platform and get your beans, bullets, and band-aids to the front. But here's how much protection those nets give you. We've all seen wire-guided Ukrainian drones finding a little side entrance, and then they're in the chicken coop. The other thing is you get a drone, two drones arrive on the scene. The first one ignites white phosphorus over or thermite over the nets. They're fishing nets, right? They burn, and then the other drones can just come in and do it. So it's a slender, it's an impediment. It isn't really a defense. But what that does these are the fundamental tenets of warfare since the Peloponnesian War, right? You need a ground line of communication. And generally, the farther it gets from the zero line, the more secure it is, right? Until World War I, where an aircraft started to be used against it. World War II, where they were wide open. Now, information is power. And what the Ukrainians do is their ground lines of communication and supply are like courses in a river. They keep them dispersed because they simply have to. And again, that goes back to something Alan and I talk about all the time. Ukraine does not have enough air defense, so it must defend its civilians. That means you frontline soldiers, you're on your own. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. So those circuitous ground lines of communication that Ukraine has mastered.
Yeah.
That also contributes to their ability to converge at the point of attack and then disperse, like any good asymmetrical fighter, right? Don't fight them, don't present a good target for them. Fight them and then disperse.
Right. It's Ukrainian brain power and willpower at work on the zero line. Also, don't use donkeys. Uh, and here's the reason why. Donkeys have a huge thermal signature, Chuck.
They really do, and uh, yeah, they just these are all the things, Alan. They're they're. I know I keep saying it, but in the 25 years that he has been in power, he has tainted with corruption every institution of Russian society, including the military and all of its subcomponents, right? His intelligence networks are mafia families. They deal in information, they blackmail people, they're in on that. The FSB hates the military.
Yeah.
So we're still seeing this knife fight. The FSB saying it's not our fault, we didn't pick this up, it's the military, they didn't take fundamental precautions. They're going against each other. But these institutions are utterly corrupted. Turning to the military for just a second, their general sucks because they're crime lords.
Mm-hmm.
They're not field commanders. They treat their soldiers like they're nothing, like they're buttons, like they're pencil erasers. They lose 1,000 men a day. I I don't think I don't know how many days there were besides Omaha Beach where
Mm.
the United States lost 1,500, 1,700, 1,800 men a day. And we know who won that war, right?
Yeah. Well, not since D-Day, and before that, not since the Civil War, when
Right.
killed and wounded rose to horrendous numbers. Back to the zero line and drones and Russians. It's Ukrainian drones now that are inflicting 75 to 80% of the casualties on Russian forces. And so again, we have scratched our heads and even laughed out loud at Russians on motorcycles and even golf carts. Golf carts don't go fast enough, but why do you see Russians on a motorcycle on the battlefield by ones and twos, threes and fours? Again, it's seeking that very slim advantage of speed to evade what the Ukrainians are doing with drones. And this is the other aspect of the Russian meat grinder. It's not bonsai charges. It is the continuous deployment of small numbers of Russians forward, hour after hour, day after day, with one mission: uh, get to a position and create cover, not just concealment, but cover for all the Russians following you. We'll get a handful there, and then we'll get a handful more there. And then we have an assembly of forces, maybe large enough to push another kilometer forward. This is why, the Russian odometer, 100 dead or wounded Russians per square kilometer, and it's going to go up.
Yeah, it's a good point that you brought up, Alan. It's, the pejorative concept of the bonsai charge. Well, the Japanese actually had a reason to do that, right? They would look at the point of the battlefield and they say, if we take this hill at whatever cost,
Yeah.
and what tools do I have available? I'm the Japanese commander. Well, I have mass. So I'm going to do that. So there's the bonsai charge, and we dismiss it as the bonsai charge. I never quite dismissed it. I mean, I saw it for the heroism, the valor, the dedication that it was. But Alan, you're right. These are not Russian bonsai charges. They don't have the morale and the moral fortitude of the Japanese soldiers. They have nothing like it. It's more like this. It's more like the first three ants that show up at your picnic. and you're killing one or two of them and three of them. Then you got five of them. Then you got 10 of them. And they just keep feeding them forward in a wasteful, unproductive application of force. These aren't converging attacks. Look, why they don't do that, I, I don't get it.
Yeah.
You look at the zero line every day, you see 150 points of contact from Kherson to Kupiansk.
Yeah.
None of them are going like this. Often they're 6 kilometers apart, the perfect range that you really can't support one another.
Yeah.
You might as well be attacking Mars and Neptune. It doesn't make any sense.
Your ants at the picnic analogy, Chuck, is the best way to picture Russian meat grinder assaults on the zero line. It is truly perfect. And
Well,
your can of raid is the drone warfare overhead.
right. And don't think that, look, the ants are always going to win against the picnic. I mean, generally they do, but the ant to soldier analogy, here's why it doesn't work. You want to do something in the military, I get one or two guys into the target, right? And they start digging in, exactly as Alan said. Concealment, I'm concealed here, but this isn't cover,
No.
right? If I get under 2 feet of concrete, that's cover. So they get in there and they start digging in. And let's say it works. And then now they've got 20 guys there. All is not lost. Those 20 guys they need a gallon of water a day. They can go weeks without food, but they need water. And when they go through their 5 magazines, they're not soldiers anymore. They're homeless people. So it isn't just, the answer is a good way to think of it. And I think it's an appropriate metaphor. But the Russians are not good at, if they achieve an objective, they have a great deal of trouble holding it. And they do so at what would normally be a militarily prohibitive cost.
Yeah.
But zero Fs are given by the Russian leadership.
So the Ukrainians have used drones, as a matter of fact, to deliver beans, bullets, and band-aids to the front line. So this is an interesting aspect of drones and logistics. Drones interdict logistics, but drones can also be used as the solution. Ukraine has done a little bit better at this than the Russians. I mean, remember when Ukraine launched these cross Dnipro River attacks on Russian positions on the South Bank? That was more than a year ago, Chuck. How did Ukraine keep those units supplied? With drones. That is the first time I heard about drones delivering supplies on the front line.
Well, they've even got very capable long-range drones like the Palantir. It's a turbojet rocket-assisted cruise missile. So this thing can fly it can either take off under a rocket, fly on its turbojet, or be catapulted up, fly under its turbojet, and fire a rocket for short approaches. But this thing was configured from the outset with a modular cargo compartment. So you could fill it with explosives, or you could fill it with drone batteries and other goodies, satellite communication equipment. And this thing can fly in and belly land in a field. And I'm not saying it's happening around Melitopol, but Russian listening guests, if you're wondering why they never stop attacking you, this could be a reason why. But that's out of the box thinking.
Yeah.
Boeing wouldn't allow that to happen. Oh no, we're not in the high-speed logistics business. But again, they were the brains of the Soviet Union, a formidable adversary, and they're showing it.
Yeah, the Ukrainian brain power. So another shocking thing that we've seen on videos from the zero line, Russian soldiers on crutches crossing a field or dragging themselves across a field. And we think, how could a Russian commander possibly deploy such a wounded Russian as part of an assault? Well, that's not what that Russian commander is doing. He's certainly punishing that Russian soldier by making him bait. That Russian on crutches is out there as bait to entice an overeager Ukrainian drone pilot to get an easy kill. So Ukrainian drone pilots are not doing that because if they do, they're likely to reveal their position, either a dugout or a position maybe in a tree line closer to the zero line. Drone pilots have become the top target on the zero line, Chuck. And that's why that Russian on crutches is out there as bait.
You know, you have to dig deep into your military depravity file to think of a commander. And you only go back to the SS and think, pulls out his pistol and says to a guy on crutches, go out and walk there. Now, I want you to dig deeper into that depravity file because it isn't the Nazis doing this to a prisoners of war. It is the Russians doing this to their own people. They tie soldiers who are underperforming, they tie them to trees at night. So a Baba Yaga drone can pick them up on thermal and kill them. And again, as Alan says, to this end, right? To find out where the drones are coming from. And I'm not giving too much away to our Russian listening guests. The Ukrainians prepare everything. They have decoy positions. Their drones are not necessarily controlled by a controller in the vicinity of the battle problem. They have the ability to network the control of these drones. And the other thing, if you give me enough time and enough shovels, I can dig something that your drones aren't going to be able to hit. And even your artillery is not going to be able to hit. This is, and this is another aspect of 21st century warfare. Another thing that's been democratized is tactical intelligence. I mean, even in my day, I'd have to somebody would have to hand me a piece of paper with the latest satellite pass. It didn't come to it comes to smartphones, but it didn't come in my day. I had to grind off the printer and here it is. But you have that instantly now. A tactical commander can know everything that's going on overhead.
Yeah.
Which is why that we see air intercepts on each other's reconnaissance drones.
Yeah.
Boy, it's I didn't know that it would keep moving this fast, Alan. When you and I first started reporting on this a year ago, not a year ago, 3 years ago,
Yeah.
it just keeps making these. And I've almost never been able to predict what's happening next. It always surprises me.
Well, it surprises me too. It's impossible to keep up with. It's next to impossible to keep track of. I mean, if you were to go inside a command post at the Ukrainian zero line and see what those commanders were able to see on laptops in front of them, I mean, it is a bird's eye view of everything that matters. And they are in constant communication with their soldiers and drone pilots out on deployment.
Right. And so the way to be successful on the battlefield is shoot, move, and communicate. Right. So everything that goes into all of those, and you think about it, okay, shoot, right? So that means you're trained, you can operate your weapon system, and you have adequate spare parts, bullets, magazines, etc. Move, you have to be adequately trained. Let's go to the Russian side for just a minute. Move, they don't know how to navigate. They don't teach land navigation to individual soldiers. They don't teach it to anybody below the rank of major because they didn't want them going to 270 and walking west, right? Okay, shoot, move, communicate. Communicate, what's it take? I got a gazillion-dollar radio, I don't have the batteries. The antenna cable's broken. My handset doesn't work. Everything has to come together. And none of it's come together for the Russians. Their training sucks. They got donkeys for logistics. You're going to the front, high-speed run. Here's your Chinese-made golf cart. Don't worry, we got fishing net over your over the road.
Yeah. Two other aspects, and then we're going to take a look at a critical map. The time on the 01. So drones have changed that because it is extraordinarily dangerous to get to the 0 line and to get off the 0 line. So rotations, which used to be every 7 or 8 days for the Ukrainians, have stretched in some cases to 20 or even 30 days on the 0 line. That is rough.
That's a long time to be in combat. The mildest way I could compare it to civilian experience, if you have ever been in a terrible thunderstorm, like ba-boom, and it's shaking your house, that's 1/10 of what it's like. And the amount of cortisol and the amount of stress that builds up, and believe me, you get used to it. Not used to it, but it's burning something inside of you. And a 30-day continual hitch, I'm telling you, it takes something out of you.
Yeah. And again, the perfect analogy. I immediately thought back to a couple of thunderstorms I've been in. One deep in a forest, but the other, unfortunately, at the top of a mountain.
Oh, geez.
And you can smell lightning. Just let me tell you that much.
I had a climbing incident like that too, and we could only hear the thunder. It was completely blacked out clouds, coming down, and it was, yeah, Mount Adams, and it was.
Ooh.
I was happy to get down. Come on, let's go. Let's get
Yeah.
down. And you couldn't see. We were on a glacier with white clouds. It was like being in a bowl of milk. Right? So
This the final aspect of what drone warfare has changed on the 0 line, and this was mentioned to me actually when I was in Ukraine, Chuck, a few weeks ago, and it was emphasized to me just recently. The time a wounded soldier remains on the 0 line. So actually, one of the most dangerous missions has become evacuating a wounded soldier. So that wounded soldier is going to spend a longer time to get behind the lines to a medical outpost or to a stabilization point. Ukrainian medics have talked about this extensively, that it has literally changed their jobs and made it a lot more life-threatening for wounded Ukrainian soldiers on the front line.
well, over the weekend, I put up a picture of a burning Ukrainian ambulance, which of course was targeted by the Russians. Every event like that is a war crime.
Mhm.
You don't get to shoot at wounded soldiers. You don't get to shoot at medics. You don't get to shoot at vehicles marked with the Red Cross. And this goes back to what we were talking about. Even in my lifetime, there was the forward edge of the battle area. So there's the 0 line out there. And then the range for a trained rifleman is maybe 500 meters, right? Certainly a sniper can shoot longer than that. And you didn't have to worry about being shot, if you were 1,000 meters back. But now it's 20 kilometers, and that used to be an artillery shell would get you. And I've had a lot of artillery shot at me, and I always thought, okay, it's in the air. I can hear it screaming in. What are the chances it's going to hit me? And generally, I'm right. It didn't exactly hit me. But now with the drones and everything else, the forward edge of the battle area is this big blur, 20 kilometers deep. And in that zone of uncertainty, that danger zone, that is where your medics have to operate. And remember, they're burdened with 200 pounds of casualty.
Yeah.
Every bump, every thump places that man or woman in jeopardy. And the Ukrainians have also reacted to this by the extensive training of their forward deployed medical personnel who can deal with things like stabilize, not deal with a traumatic amputation, sucking chest wound, cranial injury. It's the same thing that they did for us. We had lots of medical training. In addition to that, we had our corpsmen in the SEAL teams. Look, they could take your appendix out. They were smashing. But it's another adaptation in this 21st century war. Put good people forward to deal with these casualties.
Yeah.
On the Russian side, not so much, folks.
No, the Russians don't care about it. But the Russians do target those evacuations of wounded Ukrainian soldiers from the zero line. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because the Russians are watching, and they will strike those evacuations. Well, basically, it is the Russian tactic. They're going to target those Ukrainian medics just the way they target hospitals in Ukrainian cities. It's no different.
It is always amazing to me why none of this information resonates in the information space.
Yeah.
I just categorically don't get it. In this era of outrage, and everyone is outraged about something, you fire a ballistic missile into a children's cancer hospital. Where's the outrage? Right? That one burning ambulance on the field. Look, that's not the only burning ambulance in this war. Where's the outrage? I don't get it.
I don't
Russia
believe it, Chuck.
Russia retaliating for Pearl Harbor. Yeah, what do they shoot at? Ukrainian apartment buildings. Look, I published the photographs there on the 14th floor of this apartment building. That's where Shahed drone hit.
Yeah.
What's up there? Right? Nana and Grandpa are up there. Yeah.
It's also technically not retaliation, or you can only call it retaliation because of the way Donald Trump characterized it. But it's not retaliation. It's because this is the way Russia has fought this war. It's the way they intend to fight it as long as possible against civilian targets in Ukrainian cities. Chuck, you mentioned that Russia has now increased its monthly production of cruise missiles to 60 a month.
Iskanders, right? The short-range ballistic missiles. That was a number that surprised me. Actually, that's
Well, this is the Russian war economy at work. They've doubled that monthly production of Iskanders, and they also are increasing production of glide bombs and every other weapon they use on the battlefield. What they can't do is repair Su-35s and 34s. What they can't do is deploy their Armata tanks to the front line, because no one's actually certain they work. What they can't do is repair T-60 and T-80 tanks, because they don't have the wherewithal to do it. They don't have the parts.
Yeah. So that, Russia is they're not burning fat anymore. They're burning muscle.
Yeah.
This is, and look, I'm not alone in this assessment. General Hodges joins me, General Rogers, General Ryan. Russia can't keep this up forever. No nation on earth has won a war losing a battalion a day. It's never happened, and it's not going to happen now. What the West is doing is they are giving Ukraine just enough to thwart Russian ambitions in Ukraine, and that doesn't mean there won't be any territorial gains, but they are at this insufferable cost. And when Ukraine can finally hit back, these exhausted, demoralized, undertrained, undersupplied, badly led Russian armies are going to collapse like they did in Kherson and like they did in Kharkiv. So we await that glorious day. It's coming, folks, but that's up to Europe now. I don't think we can count on the United States anymore.
No, we cannot count on the United States. It is up to Europe. And, the flip side of that coin, Chuck, no one's ever won a war losing 1,000 troops a day killed and wounded. Well, no one's ever won a war with terror bombing of cities. And, this is exactly what Russia's air attacks are. It is terror. It was predicted 2 or 3 weeks ago that Russia would be able to attack Ukraine cities with as many as 500 drones a night. Now, some of those are decoy drones, and some of those are upgraded Shahed drones. They fly faster. They carry more explosives, but 500 drones a night. Now you put that on top of Kinzhal missiles and Iskander missiles, to the tune of what it was, 18 missiles the other night.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote an article last week for the opinion piece, rather, for the Kyiv Post, saying, look, there is no moral equivalency in me hitting your strategic bombers on the runway and you attacking my cities with ballistic missiles. You have to go literally, it's almost so unconceivable. You got to go back to World War II, where the Nazis fired ballistic missiles at the city of London. Then you have to go to the book 1984, where he talks about, hey, in come the ballistic missiles every day, like this is completely normal.
Yeah.
It's okay to aim at civilians. That's the target. And as Alan pointed out, it doesn't work. You galvanize a people by attacking cities. You do not make them rend their clothes and weep and gnash their teeth. The Nazis were not bombed into submission by Allied daylight, let's call it what it was, terror bombing.
Yeah.
They made more airplanes in 1945 than they made throughout the entire war. It does not work, but Russia keeps doing it.
Russia keeps doing it, and the sad thing is it was not condemned by President Trump when he had the opportunity to condemn it. Unfortunately, the United States has misplaced its moral compass. Didn't always use the moral compass. There you go. A maple leaf is on my canoe, Chuck.
There you go, Alan.
But
We
look,
are brothers from the other mother.
You have to condemn this kind of Russian terror, and you cannot be heard to invite it. That is exactly what Donald Trump did.
Well, everyone who's listening to us, and I thank you for joining us, and I thank you for telling your friends about it. Everyone listening to us also realizes you cannot stand by and watch this happen. It cannot go unremarked. And like I said, in this society where everyone has got their paid in full member to the outrage club, let's go a little bit beyond outrage, and somebody please join us in righteous indignation. Because killing children in a hospital, look, that isn't war. Let's call it what it is. That's murder.
Yeah. Look, as we get to the conclusion of this episode of indications and warnings, Chuck and I want to look briefly at what I'm going to call a map of the theater that will be at center stage this summer. So over the next 90 to 120 days. And this theater stretches really from Chazov Yar down to Pokrovsk. So right along the line of the H-32 highway. It takes you through or past every hotspot on the zero line here. Chazivyar, Kosnyanivka, Toretsk, Pokrovsk, and outside of Pokrovsk, Minervad. This is where Russian glide bombs are taking a huge toll, especially now in Kostyanovica, where there are still Ukrainian civilians living. But this is the reason why this map comes at the end of this show. It's in this theater that the drones have created that 20, maybe 25-kilometer wide kill zone, gray zone, no man's zone. It's really the drone zone, Chuck.
Absolutely. And this is a larger scale map than Alan and I normally produce. I like actually to get down to the little detail so the reader can actually have some, uh, you know, context with the geography, roads, etc. But Alan's completely right. This is the center of gravity of the Russian effort. By the end of the summer, look, I don't know where the Russians are going to wind up. This is always a question of resource management on the parts of the Ukrainians. They have to look at every bit of territory, and their decision tree looks something like this. Uh, what am I going to truly lose if the Russians gain, you know, 40 square kilometers of open farmland? Is that more desirable for me to defend than this critical road junction over here? So it is a balancing act. I expect the Russians to make gains this summer at terrific cost. We've used the ants at the picnic model. Will they get to Kostianvinka? I don't know. Will they get to Pokrovsk? I doubt that because they've been trying to get there for, since Avdiivka fell. Uh, but we'll see. The other thing is, look, are they going to get past Chasiv Yar? Well, I don't know. It's taken them 3 years to do it, and quite literally hundreds of thousands of casualties. I don't know if they're going to do it. But Alan was absolutely spot on. This is the center of gravity, and Alan and I will keep reporting on the individual sections here. We're going to come up with a new battle map with Kostiamvinka up in the upper left. We'll continue to report on Chasiv Yar. Again, these are individual maps, and also continue to report on Pokrovsk.
Yeah. And every one of these places, Chuck, Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, Pokrovsk, we've been told by analysts, they're gone. The Ukrainians can't hold on to them. And here we are, months later, 8 months later, more than a year later, Ukraine is holding on to every single one of these places and making the Russians pay a terrible toll. So, regardless what the Russians are doing in Kharkiv and Sumy oblasts right now, I think this is going to remain the center, Chuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alan and I will keep reporting. We try to cover it all from Kupiansk to Kherson. There are a couple of perennially quiet places on the zero line, and we drop in on those every now and then too. So again, you may hear numbers like the Russians are assembling 100,000 troops for this summer. I want you to always remember this: they lose 1,000 troops a day, right? So that gives them 100,000. That gives them 100 days of campaigning. That's the whole summer.
Yeah.
And I promise you, their losses this summer will be in, I don't know, 220, 240,000 casualties. and they are quite close. By our next show, perhaps, Alan and I will be discussing the 1 millionth Russian casualty in this war. We are halfway through what Vladimir Putin said he's willing to spend in this war. His quotes, folks, not mine. He's willing to lose 2 million men.
Yep. That Russian odometer is piling up with killed and wounded soldiers every kilometer Russia tries to occupy in Ukraine. And we're going to be here throughout the summer, throughout the next 90 to 120 days. Today is June 9, 2025. It is day 1202 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. But Chuck and I are going to be here telling you Russia cannot win this war. Ukraine can, because with brain power and willpower and adequate supply from its allies, Ukraine can overcome Russian manpower and firepower. We know Ukraine can do it because they've proved it. Slava Ukraini.
Heroem Slava. And folks, remember, fight smarter, not harder.